Welcome to the World Networking Podcast. Today we have Matthew Anderson joining us for the show. He brings a plethora of experience in the trades and working in a rural community on art and various projects for the community. I believe this is his first podcast, and it's been a pleasure, honestly, having him on and being able to facilitate the discussion. I really enjoyed this one, and I know you will too if you open up and listen to the whole thing and allow us to help you dive into some topics that maybe don't get presented on the daily. I hope you enjoy, and thank you for being here.
Hi, and welcome to the World Networking Podcast. Today we have Matthew Anderson joining us for the show, and he brings a background in the mountains and from a rural setting with different job sites and various skills implemented between art and labor. Honestly, he's here to share his story of how he's gotten here today. Matthew, would you care to introduce yourself more?
Hi, I'm Matthew Anderson, and I live in rural areas, and I am an artist by my own hobbies, but by my day job, I've worked in many industrial environments, to working at paper mills, to working maintenance and fairgrounds, to working at lumber mills and being in very high industrious areas with loud machinery and safety regulations and just your overall hard work. One of the skills I believe I've acquired is finding the balance between being a highly creative person, but also having to make my way by becoming a very industrious person and having that duality of that fact and the struggles with that.
Sure. No, I think balancing home life and work life is one of those things, especially with creative passions and freedoms, where it takes time to refine exactly how you want to see that proceed. Something I'm not particularly the best at. I've struggled with that. I think a lot of people have, and seeing themselves in the workplace and how that's supposed to fit into their routine that they want to craft. It's tough. You know, it's really tough, especially when it starts affecting your sleep. It's literally all fun and games until it affects your sleep, and then you feel like you're losing time.
Oh yeah. Tell me, Cameron, have you ever heard of objective personalities?
By definition, I haven't. I feel like I've heard the term in passing, but what makes you mention it?
Well, I'm not an expert at it, but one of the things I've realized is it's like, you have I have more of an intellectual personality, and that's like being a creative personality. It's like being able to take abstract concepts and bring them together to make ideas. And that's like kind of the overall experience of like the artist, is that you kind of are able to have one foot in reality and the other in the unknown, and to take those ideas and make a novel experience that is like the piece of art, and to bring it into reality. And but like, there's other there's other personalities where it's like, to be more industrious and conscientious, where you're kind of more rigid. Nothing wrong with that, but it's like, putting a square peg in a square hole, and that's how we do things. And trying to figure out those that there's these objective personalities, and you think about it, you put a very highly creative person in a very environment that's highly non-creative. There's gonna be some struggles there that were in my own experience. And one of the things I figured out was, have you ever heard of the alter ego effect?
No.
So there's this book, it's called the Alter Ego Effect, and he talks about where he's trained several people. I forgot to write this on my notes of the author, but he talks about how that there's famous stars that have figured out how to make alter egos so they can evolve and adapt to their environment from from football players going into an alter ego of like Jason, and they're like, well, Jason's a monster, so I'm going to go onto this football field and be Jason, to tennis players that were very highly skilled, but they wanted to play fair, and they were holding themselves back by thinking of being a compassionate, empathetic person that they truly were, to being more going into an alter ego of being aggressive and competitive and getting that edge on the other player. And that's kind of where I kind of figured out where I had to do to survive. And I think that's like, that's really, it's one thing that's really good that you should learn about yourself when you're very young, is figure your strengths and your weaknesses. And there's that wise term that people have said before, and it really resonates with me. If you judge a fish by how it climbs a tree, it'll go its whole life thinking it's stupid. And so for me, being knowing that I'm an artist, I'm a creative person, and you put me in an industrious environment, there's gonna be some struggles, and there's gonna be some feelings that I'm kind of, what am I doing here? Maybe maybe I am kind of a little bit ignorant or foolish, but the reality is that that's not my strength. So to develop an alter ego of, well, how about I be this industrious person that's hardworking, that's like a little bit more rigid, and to go into that space, and that when you go through those gates in that job and you become that person, you don't compromise your true self, that is my artist, and you go into this workspace. I'm just kind of curious, have you ever thought and pondered that?
Yes, I have. And honestly, I think that's a very good way to put it. The beginning portion where you said it's like freedom, and what were the two things you said? Art is the freedom of like exploring the unknown.
Yeah, it's like
And
one foot in reality and the other in like the unknown. And
yes, yeah. Well, I absolutely think the two connect as well. And um, it really, the thing I wanted to express was, do you view artists as another form of exploration? Um,
yes, it's a exploration of the mind.
so it's the mental uh plane of reality, the
Yeah.
the the mental realm in which history has time and time again tended to traditionally join in efforts towards. Like I would say, maybe it's out of boredom, or maybe it's out of imagination or collective freedom in general to be able to express through art medium that's been so inherently universal about art. I think that's something that fascinates me with it, is especially pottery. We're talking about something that's been done for thousands upon thousands of recorded years. And how do you explain why each of those pots came into possession? What happened that defined a support or a push towards making it nicer. We could have just always had plain stuff, right? That could have definitely been a reality. We could have built just with gray concrete. Everything be gray. Everything be block, stone. It's um I'm not being realistic by saying that. There's wood and there's different materials that we have, and that's kind of why we diversify. We explore things. I just find that interesting. It's no different with the mental realm,
Well,
in such a passionate subject.
well, it's that whole concept is also like, I can't remember. I think it was Picasso he talked about you got to learn all the rules to then break them, and that's also another part of art, is that you are constantly evolving and adapting. You're like reshaping the wheel. I mean, you're taking the wheel and you're reshaping it, and it's like, um you look back through history, and it's like, we first were, cave painting, and then it went to like, more Sistine Chapel. I can't think of like tempera paint, and taking egg and mixing it with pigment and putting it in the plaster, and having to work really fast to do that, to like getting to more. Then they started discovering oil paint, and the ability to work wet on wet and layer things. And then now we've kind of gone to acrylics, and then now we're in this digital art age where you don't really have a space and time of needing to work with a material. It's just kind of finite in its own. But then it almost seems as though it has its own limitations, because there's something uniquely about physical materials to digital. I've worked with some digital tools, and it's like, it almost seems like, for instance, it could make like a paintbrush type of pattern that creates texture, and maybe when you're slapping it on, it has 32, I don't know, weird patterns, and then it can abstractly make compilations of them that could create a kind of like um chaotic pattern, as though it replicates oil paint. But there's something about like you add the paintbrush with the paint and the bristles and the canvas interaction, and there's just so much more. And then the instability of your hands, or maybe you're feeling something in that moment and you're a little bit more aggressive, or maybe you are feeling a little bit more somber and it's soft. But going back to just exploring the comprehension of art, and it's like everything is constantly evolving and adapting. Like you said with a pottery, we're constantly reinventing the wheel, or adapting the wheel on ideas of art. We're always challenging and breaking the rules.
Yeah, and thinking about it, it's kind of like a conglomerate of subjects. I mean, much as everything else. Like, history's probably the most straightforward because it's just records at the end of the
Yeah.
day. But it is a conglomerate of everything that compiles into it. That's the nature of the beast. With science and engineering and physics and philosophy, psychology, there's different elements from a lot of topics that help you dive into those subjects and break them down. That's something, I thought art would be more, less subject to, with how people resonate with it. But the more I've understood how people value art, it's really about how they've experienced their own path. It's less about the structure of the art.
Yeah.
In some cases it is, but it depends why that person's there in that moment, and that's the explorative nature that I have come to consider more as I've gotten older and talked to people about it. Because there's people that have done it for years and years, and they don't make a lot, but they're still happy because they're still doing new things from the time they
They don't.
started.
You mean they don't make a lot of money as an artist?
Yeah, and in the medium that they do, like street art, for instance. That's
Yeah.
something I'm speaking from experience in San Francisco. There's some friends I used to talk to on the streets that what they did was art. They would make advertisements out of chalk and washable chalk pens to help local business get some tourism. And it did help, They got paid a
Yeah.
little bit to do it, and it helped them on the streets. And I loved it, That was a really cool way to get the locals involved without, telling them to scram. Like, if you get them to work, if they want to work and they want to help, like, by all means, there's no reason that a homeless person can't love or appreciate the community they're in. I know that sounds like opposite, but it really isn't for everyone. Not everyone on the street's out to get you.
Yeah. I think a lot of what is lost, and that's what I'm kind of figuring out, is like, it's all nice being able to make a beautiful piece of work, but then that's where the business side is lost, where to truly actually be successful almost in that dimension, you have to be just as equally of a skilled businessman, because now you made this product, and now you have to sell it and convince somebody of its value to the point that they're able to give you enough money to be sustainable and efficient enough. So, and it's like, where do you even, how do you even convince people of that? Because, art can be so subjective that how does one argue it is worth that? Because it also, one thing you have to feel out, it is novel. You look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the triangle, and really art falls into the very top of the triangles, like, finding self. And it's not exactly, you don't exactly need art. Some people could argue you don't really need art to survive, but you also look around us and it's like, yeah, art is all around. How did you figure out the fork in your kitchen? How did that even come to be? An artist figured out how to craft that. Like your bowls, some artists had to craft that. Your advertisements, to figure out where you're gonna find your tires to put on your car, an artist designed that sign. And it's like, methods, that's another thing, is like there's a lot more involved with art too, is that you look at Seurat, the pointillist painter. He was a mathematician. Same with MC Escher, just highly involved scientists and mathematicians. There's a lot of, scientific method going into making art. You have this hypothesis and this theory. Well, if I add these two colors together, that essentially they will visually mix and make this color, and there's that nuance of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, where it's hard to identify why artists don't get the respect they deserve in a lot of cases. Uh, the past artists like Leonardo and Michelangelo, famous names that come up, different mediums. There's plenty of following for them. There's plenty of respect that's given because people understand, like, that's a base, a footnote, a fundamental feature of study, of process. At least I would think in like art school and such, people have come to know like these techniques that these artists use, and I would think that it's hard to understand. Much like barbers. I think barbers got respected a lot more in society before. Um, maybe through fear, but the uh, just the fact that society operated differently, and today, like with technology, it's operating differently. And I think people just forget to step back and realize, like, even with web design, to a degree, an artist created that too.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of glad you brought up Leonardo da Vinci, and how, like, he's very well known and he's famous. And the painting that Leonardo da Vinci made was the Mona Lisa. That is actually kind of like the most known pop culture icon. I mean, it's up there with, Van Gogh's Starry Night. You ask the average person that, most people who don't even know anything about art, and you ask them about their favorite artist or a piece of art that they know, it's usually kind of one of those two, especially with the Mona Lisa. And I'm kind of curious, Cameron, do you know why the Mona Lisa is so famous?
I believe it had something to do with the way it was discovered, right?
Um,
I forgot. Like, in truth, I know that it's an odd reason though.
yeah, so most of the time people say, well, it was her elusive smile and there's mystery to it and all this sort of stuff. Like kind of the conceptualization of people analyzing the painting, people kind of loosely bring up. But what it really was that when it was before it was really kind of discovered as a pop culture icon, it sat on the wall of the museums with all the other paintings and no one really noticed it. Well, what happened was there was one day there was a Italian uh, maintenance worker that worked in the gallery, and he had some sort of idea that it was because Da Vinci was Italian, and I believe in the museum it was in France. I think it was at the Louvre. Don't quote me on that, but he he looked upon the Mona Lisa and he had this idea of like, well, this belongs back in Italy, not here. So he actually, after he got off work, he picked it up off the wall, tucked it under his arm, and just walked away with it and went to the bus and got it and drove home and he stuck it in his closet. And no one even noticed for a while until they did, and then all of a sudden it became a news story. It went from every local newspaper all the way to the world. It was international news. It rose to the Mona Lisa has been stolen, and that wiped across the whole world. And all of a sudden everybody was focused on, oh my gosh, the Mona Lisa is stolen. And that's how it became. It got its provenance of being such an iconic piece, because then when it got returned, they found him, they took it back, they arrested him and everything. It it became this such pop culture icon. Everyone knew about it, and now that it was back, everybody wanted to see it. They wanted to give it attention. So then they gave it its own wall. They put it, in what is it, 4-inch glass. Like they did all this crazy barriers and stuff like that. And everybody wants to see it. Everyone wants to take a picture of it, and they really don't know the context of that. Is that it fell into provenance due to its fact of becoming such a media icon through history.
Oh, sure, that's really fascinating. Honestly, I didn't fully remember the reason it got priced, why it did. I knew that there was some crazy event that happened with the painting being stolen. That's pretty iconic. But yeah,
And
it's wild how it's been like how an event so simple can change the value of something.
And what's really interesting is that, artists back in those days, they had apprentices, and the apprentice and the understudy, worked underneath the master artist to learn, the work. And, they might be doing something as simple as they would be preparing the background and painting all the background for the master to come and do the figures. And one of Leonardo da Vinci's understudies, he actually created his own version of the Mona Lisa, and it has way more vibrant colors. And to me, I look upon it and I feel like I get more inspired by its superior command of color and shape. And I mean, the Mona Lisa has its own style of kind of like, to me, I would describe it as more desaturated colors, but a lot of more earthy tones. But And another thing that is actually interesting is in that museum, everybody's surrounded by this Mona Lisa, but on the very exact opposite wall, there's like this giant canvas that's like 10 feet by 15 feet. I mean, it's just a ginormous painting, and it's just a masterpiece in its own, truly. And there's barely anyone looking at that. Everybody's so more focused on the Mona Lisa, and it's only why is because it's become a pop culture icon of provenance. And another thing, it's kind of interesting now that I brought that up, because I watched a video where they were pondering the idea of that art in its traditional sense was to challenge the viewer, to stand amongst it and let it challenge you and make questions about your life and your experience, on a perspective of maybe even of the subconscious spiritual, or or just ponder ideas about your life, and maybe even simple appreciation for life itself, like Van Gogh painting some oranges. And what's interesting is it's not. They find more and more art is not giving that service anymore. They find that most people, they give about like an average of 8 seconds looking upon a piece and they move on. And now it's become, with social media and the internet and cell phones, it becomes more of a backdrop for your experiences on social media of, look, I went to this museum and saw this art. Then I went to this museum and let the art, deeply like touch me in a way that made me ponder my life and like reflect.
Yeah, I definitely think the connection aspect is different for people with short attention spans. You can't say it's not different, because it's the time frame where they have experience directly with or involved with that art, that medium, where someone who's maybe spending time researching or having an education to understand that art is definitely more appreciative of the struggle of the art, the creation process, the design, the efforts put forth. Maybe they're not, maybe they have their own reasons, but they've pushed to understand why. They've crafted their explanation. And we're at a time where a lot of people want surface level knowledge. Oh well, I could. So the fact that I could know more means I should just focus on what I want to know rather than what I could diversify and learn. And again, it really depends to what that person's interested in. There's plenty of people like myself that enjoy other podcast mediums for that reason. Like I definitely listen to other podcasts where it's not something I could necessarily talk on, but I enjoy hearing that subject because it helps expand my horizons. Like medical podcasts. I'm no doctor. I love medicine, but it's not my field of expertise. I couldn't actually come on here and pretend like that is. It's not something I have a right to.
Yeah.
It's similar to an artist. I feel the same way. Like unless I have something to really show for my art and through myself, it's music. I love doing music, and that's the main art expression I tend to express. But it is different. We do different things, and I value that about you. Like
Yeah.
there's something I can always learn from your process.
Oh, well, that makes me feel very good. Thank you, because I feel like that's also part of what an artist is that they're constantly challenging the viewer and asking questions by diving into the unknown and like rendering it into physical form through their works. And going back a little bit on what I was talking about, with the art has become more of a experience to share of their own lives than more of something that like something to it's like become more of an accent of look at me and what I'm doing than it becomes more of your relationship and intimate relationship with that piece and standing amongst it and allowing it to speak to you. And I have actually really good examples that um, I've had times where I've made this piece where it's about 42 by 36 and it's a World War One plastic surgery photo. You can actually look it up online if you look up Willie Vickridge. There was this plastic surgeon called Harold Gillies, and he was assigned in World War One to reconstruct soldiers' faces that had been hit by shrapnel and so on. And he came up with this method that was like the two pinnacle. And if you look at Willie Vickridge, he's got it going on where it's like kind of like these tentacles are kind of going to his face. And when I first saw that picture, when I was looking up researching stuff about World War One, it 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 touched my soul so deeply that that war had this soldier that was representation of honor and strength and courage and fighting. It had literally contorted his full visage into a grotesque, monstrous form that people scorned, and it was like a full manifestation of the monstrous acts of war. And I had to paint it, so I painted this painting, and to me it was when I first had it in the gallery, to stand back and watch the viewer interact with the piece was so fascinating because there's probably thousands of years of adaptation that we've had to be disgusted by grotesque visages, because it's like it's a survival skill, like oh, this person's sick, I need to like be away from them because that's my survival. Diseased, I could get hurt. But then you have this idea of art is this beautiful thing that it's beauty, it's close to God, it's perfection, it challenges us in a good way, so we would desire it, we go towards it. So then there is this internal conflict within the viewer of that they enjoyed my rendering of this piece through my skill, but then the actual subject was a grotesque visage. So there was that internal conflict of looking away but looking back at it. And I had this piece hanging in my house, and I brought some I had some neighbors that were at the local college I'm at, and they were softball girls or whatever, and I brought them in and I showed them my art, and their reactions became more of, instead of allowing that concept to touch them, they were more on the lines of, oh, can I take pictures for my Snapchat story? People are going to think this is crazy. And I was like, sure. And then they were more apt about documenting it and setting it forth and then moving on. And I kind of find that very kind of interesting. Like, we are in this day and age where technology we've kind of lost our attention span to kind of sit back and ponder and like be in the moment and be in the present and allow things to affect us in a deep way. Like, we're like with the new algorithms, TikTok for instance, and all the modes, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube Reels, all that stuff. It's these new methods have like kind of lowered our attention span, where we can't really, in this age, we can't really take the time to really let things affect us. Like, we're constantly moving in the age of information. I feel as though we're almost going towards this thing where if you know the movie Incredibles, where Syndrome says, well, when everyone is super, no one is super. And I feel like in our age of information, it's almost the same concept, is that if you have all the information, you have no information.
Yeah, that's a very good point to bring up. I think the reality is teachers got to be at the place they're at because they took years of education in most cases to understand their subject. It's kind of something we've come to expect with masters of a class or a type of skill. It's gonna take years to craft that kind of thing. It takes years of working knowledge and at least general sense of what's going on to be able to explain it properly. And it becomes more apparent when people switch attention spans towards more diversification rather than quality. I mean, it's not to say there's no quality with diversity, but being able to retain the information is the important part. If you're unable to retain the information, then you're just cycling through and being a statistic. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, we're always a statistic, but are you living for it? Is that what you crave? Because craving attention, even if it's through the form of content, always constantly being on the prowl for, I think you're asking for your attention span to just be faltered. If you don't make it your main focus and you diversify through local networks, maybe if you're that it intense of a person, if you have like a need to fill where you need to insert yourself and try to develop more of a hands-on networking approach, like where you're directly helping to fuel or support a passion project or a various industry, like art. Art's definitely a medium where people tend to donate for supplies or various things, and
yeah,
that's positive. I think art supplies for kids, that's a very positive thing. When I see uh,
definitely.
things like
Yeah,
that, I'm like, "Yeah, that's great, man." Like if there's anything to help a kid in any environment get outside of their head, I know as a kid I would have appreciated that kind of help, and
yeah,
I always did when it came up. It's there's good people out there, and it's not to say that everyone's trying to be a downer or just trying to ruin their attention spans because they watch short content. And I hope people don't take it
yeah,
that way because I
yeah,
I do watch short content too, but I make sure it's not my full range of content exploration, especially for the day. If I sit there for multiple hours on end watching shorts, and I've done it. I've done it a couple
well,
times,
I've
really
done it too.
unintentionally. Yeah,
I'm
it's addictive.
I'm not saying that you inferior peasants watching short content. No, it's just the data is there that those platforms I'm saying are engineered you slowly develop a short attention span, and it's good to be conscientious of that. There's
Absolutely.
nothing wrong with that. And I'm saying what's kind of great about algorithms in a sense is that they do create these um effects where it it'll pander to what you're interested in and set up a method of a form of that, like your For You page. And what I'm saying is, like, it is good to be exposed to other things and get pull inspiration from other things. But I mean, like, for instance, the reality is our lives are not infinite. It's finite. We only have so much limited time, and there's value in being able to master a skill in something. And that's why we master things, because we have to sacrifice our time to hone in, because we only have a limited time. And so if you can set up, the idea of, like, if you can set up and become a masterful skill in whatever thing you do, and you have this algorithm and you hone into that certain thing, to me, I feel that's gonna help you out in the long run. Then I've been there too, where it's like, you might be watching an art video and then you scroll upwards and then suddenly it's a guy, icing a cake, or like someone popping some balloons or something like that. And it's like, this is entertaining, but is it really like enriching my soul? Is this really challenging me? Is it, helping me out? And I mean, there's nothing wrong with, like, maybe you worked all day and you just want to relax and enjoy something like someone popping some balloons. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying that, I'm kind of being more aware that, technology and devices, they have been viciously designed to harvest your time on watching content in this
Absolutely.
form.
Yeah, that couldn't be more true. I mean, there's been research out there for years at this point, and if you don't know, you should know that these platforms are addictive. They're in a sense gambling for time.
Yeah. And so it's like, just I would just say, be like, be more consciously aware of that, and not even be consciously aware of that, but it's also, my whole thing is like, being in an age of information. If everyone's kind of a jack of all trades, of knowing a little bit of all information, to me, I feel like there's going to be a lot more value. You're going to go a lot farther on being able to hone in on a certain skill, and you're going to have a lot more meaning in your life, from I've seen with other people's experiences of having the ability to really be in depth on a certain thing, to be skilled and master one particular thing. It takes 10,000 hours to master anything. So that's kind of mainly what I was saying, is that and in an age of kind of absorbing a little bit of everything, there's, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be a hard struggle, and it's a trial in itself for the new generation and the generations now, of how do you master something and put in the 10,000 hours when you are living in a time and age of fighting this battle, of constantly being fed information in a form of almost distraction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's hard to ignore. That's kind of why I spoke openly about it. There's so much knowledge that we have on addiction at this point. I'm confident in saying social media is addictive because I've experienced it for years. I still use it. I'm actively using it right now to record this show with you.
Yeah.
It's a necessary evil. That's something I view it as. And I don't like saying it evil, but that's just the phrase. It's a necessary evil of things I have to use daily. The amount that I use it is fully in my control and my capability to express how much I want to control. I'm not forced or obligated to necessarily use it for an extended period of time. I just need it briefly, and anything that I do for an extended period of time on it is by choice.
Yeah.
And taking back control of the reins of your time management is important. I think a lot of people avoid that because it takes change, and it would mean identifying something else to do in that time. But again, there's other things to do, like podcasting, listening to maybe a documentary or something in the background. Like, that's something I do a lot of times. Meditation
I'm
is
here.
it's hard for me to really want to get involved. At times I think about it, I'm like, that's great. Why don't I do this more? There's other times I'm like, oh man, I'm too sleepy. Like the last thing I want to do is fall asleep in my chair. And
Yeah.
I think it's not worth my time, but it should always be worth your time to value mental health.
Yeah. That's actually you made a good point with the addictions, and I kind of was thinking about how we've had thousands of years of evolution and adaptation of you didn't get self-gratifying tasks and things that give you, dopamine highs right off the bat. If you wanted ice cream, you had to make it, or you didn't have ice cream. It was, a piece of fruit that you had to climb up a tree for. And we live in such an age of convenience that you can be able to just go to the store and grab ice cream and get that dopamine rush like right away. To me, it's like that's a battle in itself too. Is that if you're constantly being able to have self gratification right away, um, you can also kind of be desensitized and numb to those things, and then those things don't give you as much of a hit anymore because you can just freely get them compared to where
Absolutely.
you do the work, and then it becomes way more. You have I think that's one thing I've noticed in my own life is like, I've had an age where, I was definitely getting into the point where it was like, you're consuming all these things that give you dopamine highs right away. You get self gratification, and it's stuck in this state of resistance. There's actually this book. It's called the War of Art, and he talks about self gratification and resistance, and you go towards those things because you look thousands of years before. um People, you worked towards that. You worked towards the comforts because you were in constant struggle, you were in constant stress. So there was high value in those things. So our bodies crave those things. You want those things. You want sugar for those energies. But it took a whole lot more effort to get those things than we are now in those ages. So it's like to kind of reel it back in and like, okay, well, let's do the work and meaningful tasks, and take the work and time to do those things and skills to master, and then you get way more satisfaction and appreciation and value for those feelings because all the work you did to make that thing like a piece of art. I get, you sit down and you do oil painting and you do out the drawing, and then you sit there and you do the first layer of the painting and the second layer, and then you do some glazes and you take all this time, and then eventually when it's finished, it's like, oh man, the adrenaline rush and the just the feelings of just satisfaction of like, I took all this time and now it's finally finished and I can like enjoy the fruits of my labor is, way more satisfying than any, I don't know, easy shot of dopamine, like eating a slice of pizza, or, I don't know, a simple example.
No, but truly, it is something that affects you over time. It affects your neural pathways.
Yeah. And actually bringing up a slice of pizza is that I did watch this video of this Buddhist monk, and not trying to get religious or anything like that. It was just more of he talked to had a philosophical idea that he was like, people eat pizza, and he's like, do people eat it for nutritional value? And he's like, well, not really. It doesn't have a whole lot of nutritional value. People eat it because they seek like this happiness. They like, they eat a slice of pizza, and it's like the anticipation of eating it and swallowing it, and it's going to give you this form of happiness, and then it's not there, so then they have another slice and they have another slice. And he's like, but with someone that has inner peace, you have this inner peace and this satisfaction, you're able to enjoy those things, and you won't have to eat as much. He's like, I don't need to get a giant cup of coffee because I can enjoy a small cup of coffee, because I have that inner peace that I am happy and that I'm just in eating that things. And it's just, the thing is, like, I know the meaning of life is like in having purpose and having a task and mastering a thing. There's that inner peace, and then you have no need for that seeking of self gratification, because you're just a person that is satisfied and has inner peace, and you're just enjoying a slice of pizza. And it's like a slippery slope you can fall upon. That's what I've accumulated through my own life.
Yeah, no, that adds up. It's very hard to know when the right time is to enact change, especially when you take overall change in general into consideration. You have to acknowledge that there's a part of society that changes with you, or you change with it. But either way, there's constant flux of things that and environments around you that you interact with that change.
Yeah.
Nothing really stays consistent. At the end
But,
of the day, even plants move.
and I think that's also another trial in itself, is that we're also in an age where it's like technology and industries are moving so fast, and to adapt and evolve is like it's crazy. I mean, like for instance, AI art, if we want to get onto that. How do I compete with a robot that could render 5 pieces of art, digital art, you know, right away, when it takes me like a month to just make one piece? And I know people are using it as a tool to manipulate on their own to come up with concepts and things like that. But that right there is like, a challenge in its own, with just how technology is moving so fast, and to adapt and evolve on that. But like you said, enacting change, um, that's another struggle in its own. Is like, I think that's why I'm talking about mastering a skill, and making a sacrifice and choosing to put that 10,000 hours in, because there part of the struggle too is of change, is that you having this informational age, you have all these things telling you all these things you could do. You could become a professional power washer, or you could like work on cars, or fix cell phones, and look at this person, they're doing this and that. You have all these opportunities in front of you, and all this stimulation of information, and to have the ability to kind of stand there and say, well, no, I'm going to just focus on this one thing, and I'm going to master this one thing. It's like, that's really hard, when you're getting constant stimulation from all these different things.
The AI discussion is definitely a big portion of how people view the art medium right now. I think they feel like, oh well, we should protect artists, but where's that support when they need help at local events? And sometimes coordination isn't as quality as it could be in any town. There's things that can be improved, and people have to be willing to make sacrifices for the community. If we want to see more done around the area around us, we have to stimulate that change. Doesn't mean you're gonna become city mayor and enact different policies like in Sim City or something, but
Yeah.
I mean keeping a conscious mind about you when it comes to change, that you can affect change and enact it as well as participate with it, is important. It's important to being a good citizen, quote unquote. But to have citizenship is to have order to some degree, and to have order is to have society. So if you ask me, is it necessary? turn of events that most philosophy would point you to do. In
Yeah.
most cases, even the Bible tells you be lawly, be presentable, be acknowledged on your local area. Like that's up to you. You have to seek that kind of participation. And if
But
you struggle, build a network that can help you do that.
that's also an interesting idea in itself, because like you look, it's like, oh well, you need to be a part of society, and it's almost at the same point, it's like we're kind of losing a society into a point, because it's like some of those foundations were based off of more of thousands of years of tribalism, of like villages being so big, and you needed to be part of the village, because if you didn't, then you were outcast. We needed everyone to participate to survive. And with the age and technology and everything that we have, we don't really need that anymore. And even on upon that, what's a really interesting thing is like, what I found was interesting is like, for instance, like dating and finding a mate. It's that thing's been turned on its whole head with technology in itself, because for instance, you might be in a small town and you might be thinking, well, here I am, I'm a pretty decent guy, pretty good looking, or pretty decent looking girl, whatever you are. And I have all these values, and I'm going to go go out to the market and date some people. And it's like, well, you might think, well, I'm competing with the rest of the town, and on the perspective of the town, my value is pretty high. But that's been totally thrown out with the age of technology and social media, that now you are competing on a world scale. And if you're competing on a world scale, how in the heck are you supposed to compete if you're a college kid and you're trying to, try and get with another college kid, but you're competing with the guy that lives in a big old city that has an infinity pool and a mansion, and they're reaching out. You know, the implications of that to me are, it's crazy. How do you compete with that? You don't.
Or you find a new avenue of expression to compete with it. And that's kind of what we're seeing is people are trying to express through being an influencer. That's one thing that's come up in more recent times. I mean, it's not to say that there's not roles that aren't influencing, and that's why a lot
Yeah.
of people hate that term. But it's not to change that some people still call themselves influencers out there and expect that to be a 9 to 5.
Yeah. That's actually really good, interesting. You bring that up with influencers, and yeah, that's like the new career path everybody wants, now. And to me, it's like, it's kind of interesting, because it's like, well, what is an influencer? Like, um, like you're always capitalizing on the same trends, and like you're trying to get all the sponsorships and things like that. And it's like, to me, I'm like, is there a nuance to it? Like, is there a moral hierarchy of influencers where it's like, well, they might have a million followers, but they might be pushing ads that have nothing related to them, compared to somebody who maybe might not have as many followers, but they're relatively using products that they actually use that are of quality. And is it quality content, or is it something that they're constantly trend seeking? And I kind of wonder if there's a hierarchy of that. Like, I haven't really dove too much into that, but what do you think of that?
I honestly think that there is a sense of appreciation people come to find from having a sense of it. Like there's let me put it this way. There's good content creators and there's bad content creators. We all consider certain content creators good. Like
Yeah.
like I would say at this point, even if you don't watch them, you'd come to respect that PewDiePie is a good content creator. Mr. Beast is a good content creator. Where's another one like Corey Kinderson? He's a good content creator. Why? Because they're successful. They have a following actively. To a degree, that proves success to the medium that they're trying to access.
But that to me is like it's kind of a thing where it's like you could say, yeah, using the amount of followers could be a measurement for success, but that's what I'm saying is like it's kind of interesting because we all know about the algorithm, and there's pumping of quantity and quality, and there's been things where people are like, I make quality content, but I don't catch that weekly post that, Instagram, for instance, is like, I don't catch the weekly post that Instagram, requires for them to keep pumping me out and exposing me to people. So it's like, somebody might be able to make a really quality editing and like be like icing cakes and doing all this cool editing and audio programming and like actually teaching people knowledge, and you could objectively agree that it is quality content, but you compare it to the person who's just hype, put their voice on a very high pitch, tone, put all the tags for like, to get the algorithm of children and be dancing around popping balloons and blowing bubbles, and they can do that really easily and fast, and they can post out two or three videos per week, and now they have 4 million viewers. So on that measurement, you could say, well, they are a successful channel, and they're very successful, and they're of almost arguably quality. But you could also argue that it's not,
Well, and the reason I think personally I'm gonna stay away from doing shorts, like I've thought about it, and you know what? If I do shorts, it's gonna be on a separate page, not linked to my main accounts, and it's gonna be very purpose built. It's gonna be very short, like ironically, there wouldn't be a lot of shorts. Is what I'm trying to get at. I'm not interested in that kind of content because as a viewer, and this is when I was just thinking this over a minute ago too.
Yeah.
It's really tough to want to connect with the medium at that level, because if I invest my time, so okay, let me put it this way, like YouTube's algorithm,
Yeah.
it for instance YouTube, but it's not the only platform that does this.
Yeah.
There's the catalyst is success. So like if you have following, it doesn't matter where that following came from. If you told, just say you had 100,000 people theoretically you could post to, and this is your first video on YouTube, and you have no footprint, but you had 15,000 views, boom, you would instantly find yourself thriving an algorithm, because you're essentially 15,000% success.
Yeah.
Like from before, which was you weren't on YouTube. So yeah, you're talking about a huge boost. The algorithm sees that as, oh, that's exponential, right? That's exponential growth. So you can manipulate that system, and that's what we see happening now with the shorts. People are using it as another tool, yet again, to manipulate how people feel and view content. And YouTube's changing their algorithm to correspond and try to figure out how to individualize it more. I think because they've seen how rapidly successful some of the shorts content have been on like TikTok, where people, and I've talked to older people about this too. Oh, it's not that bad because you're scrolling through and you can just skip the stuff you don't want to see. Well, yes,
Yeah.
but what if you just start seeing things and you see half a second things like someone blowing bubbles or someone icing a cake, for instance, right? And you just start skipping over any of that content that you see.
Yeah.
instinctively because you've started training yourself. I don't want to be a dog,
Yeah.
Pavlov's dogs trying to wait for the bell to ring for the video I want to watch. Like, no, I want to sit there. I want to sit back, open up my mind. Okay, what am I watching? Let's really think about this. Like, let's get something out of this. Like, I've been on YouTube enough. Do I really need to come here every day and to get a happy dopamine, or should I learn something? Should I take this tool and actually apply myself to it?
Yeah. Actually, you actually, when you were bringing up the working content and making the shorts and saying you didn't really want to do that, it made me actually think I think I'm going to share this as I'm kind of building this method where I was kind of thinking where it's like, you have your quality and quantity. And like I was saying before, like these YouTube algorithms, they more reward you for your quantity and posting at a certain time and so many things with hashtags and everything like that. And I do notice where there's a lot of creators where it's like, well, I try and make quality content, but then I can't keep up with the algorithm. So it's like, it's either I keep up with it and I burn myself out and then I'm like kind of miserable because I'm constantly chasing the dragon, or it's like I lower the quality of my content and then I have a better quantity. But then at the end of the day, it's like, there's that. And it's like, well, how do I get best of both worlds? And I was thinking is like, I've been trying to figure out, well, it's like, well, what is the algorithm and how does it do this thing? And it's like, okay, well, if it rewards you, for say you post every week for 3 months, and that is the method of how you get that content. And it's like, oh, there's certain thumbnails it rewards, and there's certain hashtags that are just by default are successful. And so I was thinking, well, in this age, if that's where you come into delaying gratification and you do the work, and say, for instance, you take a video and you put a lot of good quality content in it, you do really good audio footage, you do a lot of good editing, you put in a lot of information, and you do a work that when someone watches that video, they're going to be super impressed and entertained, and they're going to want more. So you do that, you make that video, but then you make 12 more that could fill every video for each week for 3 months, and you put that into your channel and you save it, and that seems like a lot of work and you're not getting a whole lot of reward instantly, and I could see there could be that instant desire of like, oh, I just want to post one and see if it works. But if you know what works and what doesn't work, and then you do that, and then you set up a date, and now you have this whole amount of videos and resources that you can now just, all you got to do is schedule appointments to post every week. You don't have to worry about making it. Now you just got to put it out there. And now I feel like theoretically now you can get full success, because now you are activating the quantity and the quality of your work, and you're doing it all in the reward basis, in the square of requirements for the algorithm to reward you for posting. And that's kind of like the method I've been kind of working on, and I feel like that's what you need to be going towards. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because it's something that you need to manipulate into working for you. That's how you get algorithms to work and to be understood, is when you yourself understand it. If you're not able to work with how the structure is best used, then you're always going to end up subpar to the top creators. Whereas I've seen small channels boost their way through. I mean, I've viewed YouTube for over 10 years. I know my algorithm's built. Constantly evolving, of course. I'm constantly changing my interests. I'm not a 10-year-old kid, like I enjoy different content, and it's changing to the degree where I get small creators, that come in that I've never seen before, but because their content relates enough, and their algorithm proves worthy of finding new viewership, it puts it out to me. It
Yeah.
puts it out to others, and that's where I find it's awesome. Like that's powerful, but we need to use it in a way that's going to not break us as individuals in our day-to-day
Yeah.
livelihood.
Yeah.
No one wants to talk to the Facebook surfer, guys. Just so you know out there, and I love you, whoever does it, and you've talked to me, and it's not just one person. I'm speaking to the crowd here. No one wants to sit and listen to you at work, sitting there in the workplace, talking about Barbara and her Facebook posts about being upset about an article. Like that's so dated. People are over that. The majority of people really want quality from their social media experience now.
Yeah.
Not just bull, you know?
Yeah, it's filler, and then it's also like, to me, I find it's like, people will do radical stuff, like, like a lot of YouTubers, they're doing like shock content where it's like, oh, it's just a prank, bro, and it's like you're like harassing people to the point that they're like being violent against you. Like it's not quality content. That's you being a menace to society. It's shock content, and I mean, shock content is valuable in its own, but in the context, I think is more of it's like a societal social thing of like there. I guess that falls into a subjective of like morally superior or inferior, but um um it's like the algorithm rewards this shock content to a point, because like that's another thing, is it seems like, sometimes the internet, it rewards, negativity, because people are more apt to want to comment and share this and be outraged. So then it's like the algorithm picks that up, and it's like, and then so all of a sudden you're like, man, I have all this like negative stuff on my feed, and I'm reacting to it right now because it's negative. And that on that side is like almost interesting in itself to me. That
Yeah.
phenomenon. Years.
Yeah, you start connotating it with a negative association. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Like that's where social media becomes uh the what's the word? That's where social media becomes the catalyst. I I guess we'll say for trouble.
With the active life of the outdoors coming up, people are looking to be out and about more. Sasquatch Farms CBD brings organically grown products in the Sierra Nevadas, from the soil to the people. Farmer John has worked on green projects on the farm since 2013. He looks forward to providing you with the highest quality soaps, salves, CBD tinctures, pre-rolls, along with some other fresh products. It takes a community in farming to survive, so any efforts made to support our farmers in the world helps to support our society as a whole. So remember, if you can't catch him out on the farmers market, catch him online at SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. That's SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Yeah, when it's like it almost especially for those prank channels, it's like then it's all of a sudden now you're getting this attention, now you're getting all these followers, and you can get sponsorships, and it's rewarding your negativity.
Yeah, and I know it sounds like we're critiquing heavy on this, and we are, but it's to the degree of trying to state that with art, this is the platform you're dealing with, and
Yes.
you're dealing with a hyper energetic, hyper fixated community that is very critical of what they see and what they view and how they view it. So if you're an artist nowadays, you're not just an artist. Most times you're doing graphics design. You're
Yeah.
doing a little bit of video editing. maybe photography. There's some form of digital media though, to a degree, and with AI implementation, a lot of these artists are nervous, and I can't help but agree, that this is gonna be a problem for this foreseeable future about digital art
Well,
and the potential AI programs have in affecting that market.
yeah, one thing I think I find in my own life is like, I recently I've been experimenting with a couple ideas of like doing kind of doing portraits and figures and then making them look like kind of like wood and painting them like wood grain and knots and stuff. And just recently, actually, some people saw my work because I gave it to a couple friends and family, and they just ranted and raved, and they wanted to see a bunch of it like right now. I want more of it. I want to see social media, and I haven't really developed any social media yet. Like I said, I kind of have this method. I want to make a large amount of work, and then like kind of ramp it all out so I can kind of get like a kickstart and a good run with my with the media and algorithm. And it's like I kind of think to myself, it's like, man, it's really hard to keep up with the demand where it's like, I want more of this, and it's like, well, sorry, I kind of literally watch paint dry for fun, so it's gonna take a while.
No, thanks for all that information, Matthew. And honestly, I wanted to lead into talking about a fun fact about yourself. So anything fun that you've done, maybe in the last few years or in the past that really reflects your character?
It reflects my character. Yeah, pause for dramatic effect. I gotta think of a couple things.
That's okay. The audience is silently judging.
Uh, the thing that popped in my head was I did some fire spinning and spitting fire. I
Now,
have
when
a
did
couple
you do that?
um like several months ago, like in the summer. I had some friends that they're part of a group where they spin fire, and they're like fire performers. And we went out to the forest one time, and they were just playing some music and playing with fire. And I asked them, I was like, "Hey, could I try this?" And they're like, "Sure," And all it is that they take like a corn flour, and you like or cornstarch. It's cornstarch, and you put it in your mouth, and then you take the torch and you put it up and you spit the cornstarch in front of you into the torch, and then it creates that effect of like blowing fire. And I did that several times, and I had like a consistent blowing of cornstarch, and it made this giant long flame, and it was a pretty cool thing. And I spun the baton a little bit, but it was a little bit it was a little bit intense because you do have to keep it going because it's got white kerosene on it, so it can burn up really fast. So you have to keep it consistent and spinning, and there's all kinds of techniques of balance. But I would say that was definitely an experience that I thought was really interesting. That yeah.
No, that's really awesome, honestly. Um, no, that's interesting, Matthew. I think fire dancing is one of those things that a lot of people dream to experience, and it's something I want to do. I have no experience doing it personally, but that's cool. I didn't know about the cornstarch.
Yeah, it was definitely a trip for me because I feel like there was some kind of secret formula, or like it was like kind of Hollywood smoke and magic mirrors sort of a thing, and then it's like just simple as cornstarch, and I'm like, oh, well, okay, of
Yeah,
course they have a lot of safety regulations in place, like they got fire extinguishers everywhere, and you got to be in an open area, and like I said, you got to spin the baton in a certain way to keep the white kerosene moving. But yeah, it's some of those dancers, they're they've honed their skill, and it's quite a skill to behold and witness in the moment. It's quite a intense
A spectacle.
spectacle. Yeah, that's a good word, spectacle.
Yeah, it came to mind that is exactly how I feel when I see fire dancing. Like one experience I'm thankful and fortunate to have is seeing fire dancing in Hawaii. I only got to see it once, but
Really?
like wow, yeah, I got to go to a actual luau in uh 7th grade, and that was definitely an experience I wouldn't trade, because just the cultural experience, man. I'd never seen uh such a coordinated group of dancers with live fire. I mean, yeah, the local dances are great too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
There's great groups, but seeing traditional luau uh, decorations, decor, and cosmetic is just it's really powerful.
Yeah.
It shows how old the tradition is. I wanted to move forward and ask you actually if there was any points on the art discussion right now in modern society where you feel there's new forms of art emerging that you think are paving the way. Maybe making something that people aren't used to seeing in the art world,
Hmm. Yeah.
even if it's underground. Small scale. I know there's always cool little projects going on.
Yeah. I would say I don't know, one that popped right into my mind is that there's actually this South African artist that I saw a couple of years ago, and he takes pieces of plastic and he cuts them into strips, and they're colored pieces of plastic, and he takes a heat gun and he like melts them onto the canvas and makes this kind of, he's like a watercolor artist, but he makes these kind of like portraits out of like melted plastic. And I thought that was like a very really interesting, unique medium to use that. And then it almost kind of puts this kind of recycle effect. So it's like almost a green environment kind of ideal, and kind of spreads awareness for like, some of the situations in Africa with the trash and such. But I don't remember his name, but I mean, if you literally looked up probably South African artist uses plastic to make art, it would come up. And that to me, I saw that was really some interesting stuff. There's I think JM Sculpture is on YouTube, and he'll take pieces of wood, and he'll buy all these different types of species and grains of wood, and he'll stack them up, and then he'll pour resin and epoxy molds all over in a square, and then he'll chainsaw and sculpt these like pictures of wildlife, like a seal or a whale, or like different types of animals. And he cleans it all up, and it's like you see this translucent clearish plastic glass looking sculpture with like all of these different grains and colors of different wood species. And that to me is really interesting. He also does tire art too. He'll sculpt like for instance, he'll sculpt a crocodile, and he'll make a fiberglass mold, and then he'll cut strips of tire tread and he'll put it all over it, and it creates this texture of like this crocodile, but it's all made out of tires.
Oh, that's really neat.
Yeah, really cool stuff, man.
And it reminds me of something my grandpa would make with like I won't describe the process because
Yeah.
something I want to maybe make too, like but it had to do with like exotic woods and making them into like containers for ashes or joints or cigarettes, cigars, things like that. Like but he would have lathed them by hand and worked with the wood to create a piece that could open and close with one screw, and that was like his big thing. He was trying to do that before he passed away. And I have his machine, so hopefully I can pick up on that.
Actually, speaking of wood, I actually recently, so where I live in this rural area, um, there's been some trees that they've migrated over, like way back in the olden times when they all migrated over, and they brought these trees with them, and they're not native here, but they're called black locust trees, and I was just trimming up some of the branches in the backyard, and um, I thought to myself, well, could I sculpt with this? How about I look up some information? And I figured out it pulled up some hardwood, and it's a hardwood. And this guy popped up, and he started talking about how it's actually UV reactive. And I was like, wait, what? And been getting into blacklight art. I've been trying to do some stuff with some black and white art, like visible UV paint and stuff like that, kind of playing with concepts.
That's
But
really cool.
to hear that was just kind of crazy. And I mean, this guy, he took a lathe and he made like this pot out of this locust tree, and then he turned on a black light, and he's like, the ions and the atoms in the wood and stuff like that, they absorb the UV light, but they don't know how to expel it. So the way they expel it by glowing, and it turned like a yellowish glow to it, this wood. And that to me was so trippy, and to find out that was just wood that was sitting in my backyard, I was like, what?
Oh, that's so cool too, and that's something on like a psychedelic trip. If you were to hear it, someone be like, "Oh, I'm bringing out the UV tree, man." And you see that, and you're like, "Whoa, it's radioactive,"
Yeah.
It would be something cool to just have.
Cool, man.
And that's exactly where art thrives, right? Is when people are in expressive states of mind. When they can relate.
It's one of those things where it's like a question everything, and that was, to me, that I literally unlocked that badass secret by like just asking the simple question of like, well, could I work with this? And like looking deeper into it and taking the time to look into it, and then finding that out and being like, whoa, that's crazy.
And it's
I mean,
powerful.
in the future, if I can find, I have a friend, he has a big old tree and he has chunks of it. And I think it would be cool if I could get into chainsaw art. And if you could like sculpt some big old pieces out of it and make something cool. I mean, I think that'd be cool to have like a chainsaw wood sculpture that reacts in UV.
Absolutely.
Yeah, finding that was really, really cool. So I mean, yeah, it's just coming up with abstract expressions and stuff. And I mean, like finding trying to think of like other artists that I've like followed in the past that are like just super, super trippy. But I mean, you see all these sometimes I see artists with like optical illusions where they'll like, they'll hang chunks of wood or like paper all from the ceiling, and it's all like layered in all this weird chaotic way, and they'll put a light on it, and then you look at an angle and it casts a shadow of like this crazy shadow portrait, and then they put another light on a separate angle and it creates a totally different shape on top of that. And to me, that is just like some 4D chess, like 200 level IQ, where I'm like, to even just sit there and comprehend the work it would take to like, just make one picture, but to make like kind of this floating sculpture, make multiple pictures from multiple angles, is just, to me, is just like some level of like, I want to be like, ask this artist, be like, do you have like a level of like understanding physics and like certain science and mathematical properties? Because I'm like, this to me seems like sorcery or witchcraft, like.
Yeah, and it's honestly something that ties into the next question I wanted to ask you. Is there a point in time where you really gained an appreciation for wood because you seem to be really interested in the idea of doing that wood art? And I just wondered if there was correlation with the work you've experienced in the past 10 years, or is that something you've tried to um, develop more ways to interact with from being in a rural area?
I'm actually I'm glad you actually brought that up because it kind of goes with the whole thing I was bringing up before of like the characteristics of like kind of being a creative person in an non-creative environment, industrial environment. I work at a lumber mill, and you know going into this place, and it's like you got to work, and it seems cut and dry where it's like there's just everything's caution yellow, and you got railings and machines and a loud environment, and things come in and things come out. There's not a whole lot of like, well, I can't really be inspired in this place. But I worked a job where it's like you had to interact with the wood. You have to like grab it and throw it into certain places to send it on the conveyor belts to be refinished or whatever. So my part of my job was to stare at this piece of wood and go, okay, is there like too much weight on it? Is it not dimensional? I need to throw it to this belt so it can be go into another machine to be refinished to be more square. And what was kind of trippy about it was like you're running different species, like your white fir, your Douglas, or your sugar pine or your ponderosa pine. Like for instance, sugar pine will get this like stain on it. Some people say it's a kind of what is it, a kind of moss, or not a moss, but um
Lichen or algae?
yeah, like a lichen or algae, but I've heard it's just stain. It's when the wood gets old, but it'll get this blue stain on it. And it'll get this blue stain all through this yellowish pine. And, it just touches in weird ways. And, like, you'll get that, or like, maybe the tree had a disease, or like, it broke at some point, or like someone put a nail in it and it creates these knots and these gaps. So then you get this board that hops up, and it's like, whoa, this is like trippy. Like, I mean, if you know what burl is, burl is when these trees, they get this like kind of like rounded tumorous mass on them, and they actually don't know how to fabricate that. The supply and demand, they don't know how to farm that because it's like some kind of disease, or like somebody will put a nail on it, and it's just how the tree reacts and grows. But when they cut into these burls, and if you see some of these burls, I mean, it looks like a psychedelic, trip, like, I mean, it's like the grains are just kind of wavy. And
Crazy.
yeah, it just looks like it was born out of the 60s or something, Um,
Well,
but
and that's actually a good point to bring up, and I'll be brief because I don't want to cut you off. This is great. It's
yeah,
just the trees you're working with, like, yeah, you're talking generations old.
yeah. Well, I can't necessarily say that. I don't think they cut from old forests. I don't think that's
No,
illegal.
no. But I mean, they're at least
But
one generation old.
yeah,
It's most likely been planted, like you're saying, in the last 40, 50, 60 years.
but kind of actually but it's there's different like because was it I listened to a podcast where this guy talked about how like mycelium is everywhere, and they actually figured out that trees have like neural networks, and certain trees will send certain nutrients to each other. I think when you talked to Caleb on the podcast, he was talking about this. But
Yeah, mycelium.
yeah, mycelium. Mycelium, like they were saying how mycelium actually interacts and evolves, and they like actually control the environment and nature. And it's like everyone thinks we evolved with mycelium, and it's like kind of like mycelium's actually making us evolve so they can like produce some of the situations. But
Yeah, no kidding.
it's like they I think there's this book I'm trying to get. I think it's like trying to find the mother tree, because actually there's these networks of trees, and they interact with each other, and they share nutrients. And there's like, I guess that maybe there's possibly this master tree that like, controls everything, or, and it's like, it's just so trippy learning about that I don't even know a whole lot. It was one time I watched the podcast and learning about that, and it's like maybe that's part of it. Maybe there's nutrients have been taken away in a certain area, and then that in that return it creates burls and stuff like that. But there's all different kinds of knots and stains. I mean, I've literally seen the whole rainbow in different pieces of wood. I mean, I'll get like a piece of wood that jumps up and it looks like somebody took a bright yellow highlighter to it. Like, it was just crazy. And then I've seen it where it's got red stain and like a purple wine stain, that blue stain. It's had some green in there. I mean, I could have had all colors of the rainbow with some of the wood I've seen. And so I got
and
to
all natural.
Yeah, all natural. No, nothing that that was interacted with it. It was just they cut through the tree, it goes into the saws, it turns into lumber. I see the lumber and it's like, whoa,
Well, and one thing about the colors are the dead trees, like from fires and such, that various mills are harvesting. Do those create different colors too when you see
yeah.
those?
So yeah, that's like what I was saying, is like some of the older trees, it gets that blue, like with pine, it gets that blue stain. Actually, back in the day, they used to not want that and they threw it away. But then the industry actually named it, well, rare and beautiful. This is rare and beautiful. And now it's like got an industry in itself of like, people desire it because it's got this kind of unique color to it. And I mean, if you really look at it, some of the pieces I've gotten, I'm like, it is really beautiful. Like, just to have that weird kind of navy blue, tones on it. And sometimes it doesn't affect the whole piece of wood. It's like just certain parts, and it makes these like really unique shapes. Sometimes it'll have these kind of flickering flame kind of shapes of blue around a knot. And it just, I mean, some of it just looks like a piece of art. I mean, sometimes I've had pieces of wood that I actually got one recently. It came on by and it looked like there was a branch that it tried to grow outwards, but then it grew into the tree. So it like made this like weird zigzaggedy brown thing going on, and then there was another knot, and so I cut it off, and then I looked at it again, and it literally looks like there's a snake with its mouth open in this piece of wood. And that was all made from nature, and it's like a work of art in its own. I'm actually going to get a frame for it and lacquer it and everything like that. But I mean, the piece is amazing, and it was just just nature had a defect that was really not a defect at all, just like an amazing perk, really.
Yeah, no kidding. That's honestly really cool. I didn't know about the colors. I knew about some, but not all. Like, especially the deep wine colors. That's surprising.
I've gotten some deep wine colors. I specifically can't always remember because I never got the species sheet. Sometimes I would just show up and do my job because it's like, I'm just here. But the different colors were just like, it's crazy. And like with the different knots and stuff like that. And so instead of going against the grain and being like thinking upon myself of like, well, I'm an artist and I'm in this industrial environment and I'm not really in a creative environment and like this kind of sucks and like boobity hoobity me. I more allowed myself to be open and be like, wait a second, I'm being exposed to these beautiful things and designs of nature. Why not lean into this? Allow this to inspire me. Allow my environment right here and now inspire me. Like, so I've been taking that and been, making portraits and figures and making them look like wood grains and knots. You have like maybe a certain curve of the body that curves inwards. And if you would take a wood knot and put it right there, it looks like that it naturally curved with how the wood grain and the knots went about. So I'm exploring that right now. And it's like, learning from the seeing the things that I've seen, it's like, the applications of like designs and making, ideas and different designs and just the concepts are just kind of like infinite. And what's kind of great about wood knots and stains and wood grains is that they say it's like a fingerprint. Not all one board is the same. So instead of kind of having this academic, I kind of been going more for a classical academic kind of style. And, that can be rigid in its own of like, if you don't draw the human anatomy a perfect way, it looks wrong, or you don't capture the anatomy. It's like, it looks weird. It's like, you got to work on your anatomy compared to this, where it's like, doing it in this style. There's not really a one size fits all. There's not really a that's wrong. It's just kind of like, wow, that's like aesthetically pleasing and an interesting design.
Yeah.
So I feel as though I kind of learned the lesson of like, instead of fighting against my situation, it's like I allowed it to affect me in a positive way, and I've kind of now flourishing because of it.
Well, I think that's honestly a great point to interject a question about your personal recommendations for media or books or different forms of articles that you would recommend to the viewing audience.
A couple books.
Yeah, really any resources that you found to be helpful on your journey.
So I would definitely recommend hold on one second. Would be the War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. That talks about breaking through the blocks and winning your inner creative battles. To me, that is totally a must. It goes into about self-gratification and fighting resistance, and like kind of like an inspirational thing of like, just do the work. Sometimes, the thing about it is like, sometimes you won't make the best piece of art. Sometimes you'll make ugly art. But it's like, for instance, like, you got to look at it as like going to the gym. It's like, you're not going to be able to deadlift 300 pounds by just going to the gym and trying it. You got to work your way up to it. And that's the thing about inspiration is like, I think there's a lot of this weird romanticized stereotype is like, well, I don't do art until I feel the right time to do it. And it's like, well, that's great and all, but if you do exercises like, you get your hand really loose on doing certain gestures and like getting yourself set up with values and tones and understanding color theory and all those things, those are all exercises. And doing exercises every day, you don't really have to make a amazing piece of work, but you get that fluidity involved. And then when you do have a spurt of inspiration, you can execute it with ease. And then you kind of blow people's minds where they're like, whoa, like, how'd you do that? It's magic. You're like a genius. And it's like, I'm not really like a genius. It's like, I'm not really that, you could say I'm not even really that talented. It's just, I've put in the work, the skill. Anyways, books. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. I would recognize Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear. That one was great. Another one I would say, Daily Rituals, How Artists Work, edited and texted by Mason Currey. That one's really great. It goes through from writers to poets to artists about their daily routines and how they work. And that might kind of give a perspective of like, maybe you act a certain way and you have these certain things you go about your day because maybe you're a creative person and, that might resonate with you.
Those are great. I'm actually excited to look into those myself. If you don't mind sending me the links, I'll make sure that our viewers have the links in the description.
Another one I would recommend that I think is really a fascinating book. It's quite a big one, but it's called Divine Fury by Darwin M. McMahon. Last name's a little hard to pronounce, but
We'll put it in the links.
yeah. But that whole book has to go from they go asking about the existence of genius and where it comes, and it goes all the way back to the very beginnings of genius, where it goes back into ancient Rome, and them talking about how they thought that you had this daemon, as they put it, and it would speak to you, and it would speak to these tell you these ideas, and kind of the concept of men do not have ideas, ideas have men. And then it goes
Ooh.
up to that, yeah. And actually, a lot of these books, especially with Big Magic and the War of Art, actually they all kind of like realign into this idea, that overall arching idea of like the goddess speaking to you, and you have to be open to listening. That, like, and to me also, I actually absorbed that, and it also helped me a little bit, because when you are a really talented person and people see your art, they always want more of it. And it's, why aren't you doing this? Don't waste your gift. And that can be like really a lot of pressure. So when you kind of take it more of the perspective of like, no, well, I'm open to these things. The ideas have me. I don't have the ideas. It kind of allows you to just be kind of like, be okay with the idea that you're not always creating all the time, and you have a life, you have to take care of things, and you're not exactly you're not really exactly losing out on anything, because you just have the ability to tap into I don't know, this divine energy, theoretically. But anyways, the divine fury, it goes into from the basis of these daemons to, it goes all the way up to modern day, where they're pondering about what is genius, and the connotations from it, from from all the way to ancient Rome to like France, and them pondering, and then the 1800s, where they were like dissecting a lot of brains and seeing if they could physically find genius, to
Yeah.
more of the connotations and the social connotations of, like, for instance, believing Albert Einstein is a genius, and was it more of a context of that it was a social context of the power and idea of genius, than it was like a really an actual physical concept that manifested through this person.
No, I think that's great, honestly.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be points in time where, different things are gonna emerge about uh, divine nature and spirituality and things like that. Where, yeah, there's always opinions in the matter, right? And it's not to discredit what you recommended. I think that's great.
Yeah.
It's just always fascinating, that discussion, what emerges from it. But with that, I want to invite you to give our audience your final statement. If there's anything you feel like you wanted to relay or present, maybe a challenge, maybe a lesson that you've learned.
I would say no one knows you like yourself, and always question everything. And by learning yourself, you can understand your strengths and weaknesses, and you can give yourself accordance to compassion and empathy to that. And then, when you do know your strengths and weaknesses, and you're aligned with yourself on that way, what's great about the world is you can always work on yourself, and choose to say, well, here's this one thing I don't like about myself, but I have the power to improve it. And so by me asking questions and questioning everything and searching for truth and knowledge, I can better improve myself and the world around me. Being able to be aware of that power is like, it's a truly enlightening thing. So I'd say, yeah, seek that.
Well put, honestly. it's not bad to keep in mind to put your best foot forward. But this has been a pleasure today, Matthew. And
Yeah, thank you for. I appreciate it.
no, thank you. And I hope maybe in the future you'd consider coming back and maybe interacting in a different conversation with another guest or another situation. There's different artists that have shown interest for the show, and if we get it coordinated enough, then I might reach out and see if that's something you'd enjoy.
Yeah, that would actually. I think that would be really interesting. Be able to ponder and pick other people's brains and collaborate on different other experiences, and that would be really awesome.
Honestly, I think you had a wonderful format with the show today, and I just really appreciate the time spent. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for being part of the show today. Matthew was really fun to interview, and honestly, I hope to do some further collaboration in the future with him. We're going to be working on art projects and motivating others to involve themselves in maybe future podcasts that we can all participate in more discussions for. So I look forward to it. This holiday season has bumped the schedule around a little bit. There's been a lot of busy individuals and our episodes have been a little delayed, so I apologize for that. We're working on getting that back together, and we have a lot of guests coming up in December that are eager to be on the show. So look forward to new episodes very soon. Thanks again, and this has been the World Networking Podcast.